everyone, and thank you for joining us this afternoon for the University of Regina's 2023 Alumni Effect virtual speaker series. So my name is Dr. Erica Carlton, and I am an associate professor at the Hill Levine Schools of Business at the University of Regina. And over this next hour, we are going to talk with one of our alumni, Melissa Coomber-Bendtsen, a lifelong learner of the University of Regina. And I'm actually personally very excited to speak with her because I research in the area of women in leadership. So it's going to be wonderful to be talking for the next hour with a woman leader. And I'm also an alumni of the U of R, so it's just great. But before I introduce Melissa, I'd like to acknowledge that the University of Regina and its federated colleges are on Treaty 4 and Treaty 6 territories, the homelands of the Nehiyawak, the Anishinaabeg, the Dakota, Lakota, and Métis nations. The University of Regina's Alumni Engagement Department is pleased to be able to offer these Alumni Effect speaker series virtually. And this is my first time hosting this lecture, a lecture in this series. And I hope that having been to today's lecture, it'll inspire you to return to some more of them. So I hope today is like a wonderful experience for everyone. I'd also like to point out that these sessions are being recorded and will be posted to the U of R alumni website. So you can catch the presentation again or share them with people you think might be interested in these presentations. You'll see the link for the alumni website in the chat if you're interested in kind of finding the video later. Okay, so now that all that stuff is out of the way and Melissa's patiently been waiting, smiling at me, it's now my pleasure to introduce our first Alumni Effect speaker of 2023, Melissa Coomber-Bendtsen. We're so happy to have you with us. So Melissa received her Bachelor of Education from the University of Regina in 2002 and has been leading the YWCA of Regina since 2015. She is the youngest CEO in the organization's 110-year history, and she is the recipient of the 2022 ACAA Humanitarian and Community Service Awards, and credits her time at the U of R for preparing her for her current role as a CEO in the largest and longest serving women's organization in Regina. So Melissa stands as a reminder that women's voices should be heard and should be amplified. So today, Melissa is going to discuss with us her path from studying education at the University of Regina to how she ended up as the CEO of the YWCA and working in the nonprofit sector. So just for final information, if you guys have questions throughout this, please save them for the end, and we'll hopefully get through a couple questions right at the end. And so just while you're listening to Melissa chat, please feel free to put your questions into the chat feature, and we'll hopefully get to some of them at the end of the session. So now I'd like to turn the floor over to Melissa and allow her to do, I introduced her, but whatever else she wants to say to introduce herself, we'd love to hear it. And then we'll start off with some questions. So thank you again, Melissa, for coming.
Thank you so much, Erica, for that introduction, and thank you very much for having me. This is an awesome opportunity. I do absolutely love talking about my time at the University of Regina and what it's meant for me and to my leadership. So as Eric had said, my name is Melissa Coomber-Bendtsen. I have the pleasure and honor of being the CEO of the YWCA in Regina. I'm a settler here in Regina, born and raised in Regina, and I currently live in the Qu'Appelle Valley with my partner and our dogs, and I have a group of deer that are, I'm pretty sure they're eating the cedars in my backyard, which I'm okay with, because it's so fascinating to see deer that close for somebody who grew up in the city, and I do love being in nature and in the valley, but to have them that close and they just let me stare at them and look at them, and my partner tries to shoo them away, and then I get upset. But anyway, right now, currently, that's the most exciting thing in my life is this group of deer that I get to watch eating the cedars, ruining my garden, but that's okay. They're fantastic.
Yeah. I'm in agreement. I definitely let the deer come.
Yeah, they're really cool.
Yeah, so that's great. So, okay, so I'll start with some questions, and like from my questions, feel free to expand on whatever it kind of brings to mind for you. But thinking about your path from studying education to helming one of the best known advocacy organizations for women in the country, how do you think that the foundation in education has informed your work as an advocate?
Yeah, this is always something that I go back to and think about my time. I think when I went into education, I come from a long line of teachers, of educators. And so going into university, I was also somebody who felt it was important to be able to understand what it is I was going to be the end goal for myself. And being a teacher seemed like something that both, like I said, my family had done, but also was reflective of some of the jobs that I had as a young person. I was a swimming instructor, a camp leader. I was in these kinds of roles. And as I went through education, I think, many people will talk about this in university, that opportunity to expand your knowledge and have conversations with people and just be exposed to so much more. I became a social activist and at university. And I tell this story where once we were doing something around, I don't know why it's connected for me around student fees, but I feel like that was the group I was part of. We were talking about student fees, but then at the same time, we had decided we were going to boycott a something around asbestos. I can't remember the details of it, but here I am. I'm a social activist. I'm charged. I've had these great conversations with my fellow students, and I'm learning new things at university. And my job was to make a sign that said, "Asbestos is asbestos," and I made the sign. It was going to be on helium balloons, so it was going to float up. I think it was in the Ad building. It was going to float up to the very top of, all the way to the president's floor of the Ad building. And my job was to release it. So I ran into the Ad building and I released it. And as it was floating up, I looked and I realized I had spelled asbestos wrong. And to be quite honest, I'm not even sure what it was, why we decided asbestos is asbestos, but I ran out of the Ad building so fast. But it was that kind of passion and that kind of care about what was happening in the world that was sparked for me at university. So further to that, I think that being in education and really starting to understand that there was an opportunity for change, that working with young people in education presented itself with such an awesome opportunity to talk about social issues with young people and to inspire other young people to learn new things, just like I was sort of experiencing at university, was something that I really got excited about in my studies. And I think then also the idea of relationships and how important that was. I had some great mentors as a young person in high school. I loved school. I loved the social, the community aspect of it, but I also loved learning. And so to be able to participate in that as an educator, I think was something that I was really excited about. And I spent some time teaching. And I think that I was somebody that didn't have enough patience maybe at the time as a young person for institutions and how they functioned. And so I quickly got out of that space and went into community development and frontline work, but always carried with me the ideas around how to be able to lead or move a change. Because I think for me, that's what being a teacher is. That's what education is about providing information, but sort of leading that charge and that change. And I think that sort of became a foundation, that and what I learned at university in terms of social justice and how to gather information and knowledge to stand up for the things I believed in were foundational, I think, to my work, both as a leader in the community, but also as an advocate.
Great. Yeah, that is a wonderful example. And I mean, I think that's kind of what universities do, right? It's all about, critical thinking and expanding the way you think about things. That's a wonderful answer. So I'm going to ask you a question about mentorship, because you kind of briefly touched on it a little bit in that prior answer. So who would you say your mentors were, and what examples did they set for you as you navigated your way through your career? And relatedly, how did mentorship help you achieve your career goals?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm fascinated by this concept because sometimes I think when I first started as a CEO, um, I would talk to colleagues that were men leading organizations or companies or starting businesses, these things, and they'd say to me, "Well, who's your mentor?" I'm like,
Mhm.
"Oh, I don't have one," and I didn't realize there's this like kind of underlying gender difference between how women seek mentors or how that's sort of set up. And I think maybe sometimes we look for formal processes.
Oh yeah.
And what I came to realize is that it's actually really quite informal. And you can call anybody a mentor and you can ask somebody to be your mentor. And then that's just what happens. And so I had great influence and saw women in my life and women leaders that influenced the things I did all of the time. I don't think I called them mentors, and I never saw it that way. Until I then realized the super secret, which was you just say they're a mentor and then therefore they are. And so once I found that out, it became this whole wonderful world of mentors in my life. And I'm not also one that's thrives in, super dictated kind of processes. For example, if something says there's a networking session and they tell me I have to network, I'm angry about it and I'm not certain. But if I'm in a situation where I'm networking and I don't know what's happening, then I get the most out of it. So the same is true for mentorship for me in my life, that there is no doubt that anytime there's been something that I know is not my skill set or I'm uncertain about or don't have the information I need, the first thing I do is start calling the people, the mentors, the people who've influenced me in the past, and asking for their support and their advice. And also I would say, following up with those people and those folks. I've come to understand that everybody comes into your life and your career at different points for different reasons. And sometimes you don't know why that is. It's not formalized. You can't quite understand it. But following up on every single one of those interactions for me has created so much opportunity and so many learnings. And so I think, if I'm going to say mentorship, like informal mentorship for me has been a huge part of what I've done, or what I've been able to do because of that informal mentorship and influence.
Yeah, good. And I think that is a great point for everyone listening. When we think about mentorship, you might think it has to be a formal process, but it really isn't. Like even you saying like, you just have to call them a mentor, and I'm like reflecting on, yeah, really, like they don't even need to know you think they're mentoring them, right? Like it's like, and that's like such great advice that it's not like I need to formally find a mentor and make it really like tough and awkward. So that's like, yeah, that's wonderful.
Yes, yeah, and I think there are like opportunities, and for some folks that works really well. For me, it never did. It was never a natural kind of fit, so I never sought it, and yet I had people always that I could call or look to or watch. And yeah, I think like lots of things in my career and my path, if you just change the definition or the name in your brain, that it works for you,
Yeah, and it's a mentor, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's wonderful. So what are some challenges you faced when you began your role as a CEO of the YWCA?
Yeah. I was the youngest CEO of this organization, but also the youngest CEO of all the YWs across the country. And oddly, I think I still am. I don't know what's happening, but maybe I'm not aging, which is lovely. That for me was a challenge. That for me was a challenge because I was also, as a woman leader and as a young person, I suffered huge from imposter syndrome. And I sort of had to come to terms with that piece. I had enough confidence that the imposter syndrome never made its way into the boardroom or into a meeting or to something like this. But certainly at the end of the day, I would sit back and go like, who the hell thought this was a good idea? How
Yeah.
did I manage to get this role or be able to have influence over something that I thought was so important? Um,
Mhm.
I think I quickly, because you have to, come to terms with understanding that what that like how imposter syndrome doesn't it's not helpful to go down that path or to think that way. And so I think it became very clear for me early on that I needed to really understand what my strengths were. And I like to call them my superpowers because that makes me feel even better about them. So I had to really understand what my superpower was and what it wasn't. And when I got to that point, then I knew who I needed to build relationships with. I knew the mentors, the influence that I needed to surround myself with, so that I could gain confidence. Because I didn't have experience leading an organization. I had led, staff teams and departments
Mhm.
and things like this, but I didn't have that experience. So I needed to surround myself with people that would bring their superpowers to the table.
So just on an aside, what would you say your superpowers are? I think that's an interesting
Yeah,
comment to make. So what would you say your superpowers are?
yeah. I think that I've I've changed this answer recently, because before my capacity to build relationships with people and to find commonality, and express my views or my plans or the project with somebody else, was my superpower. I think recently I've realized that intuition is something that greatly influences that, because I think there's a lot of people that are good at relationship building and forming these kinds of pieces. But I'm learning. I just recently learned at a storytelling workshop that the Indigenous way of being or knowing is that we have 7 senses, not 5, like we traditionally think, and the 2 senses that exist in Indigenous ways of knowing and being that don't exist in traditional thought process of senses is intuition and premonition. And this really validated for me the concept that I taught, I was like, oh, I have a gut feeling about this, or I'm going to go with my gut on this. I used to say these words all the time, and I didn't really know them. I guess I didn't really lean into them because I thought maybe they were just hairy fairy or, something like this. Excuse me. I've now come to acknowledge that intuition is something that can be practiced, that can be leaned into, and I think my intuition is strong. I think it's one of my superpowers.
So I just want to comment on that's interesting in terms of your challenge that you first faced is imposterism. I think that's incredibly interesting, and probably a lot of women and men entering new roles, especially within leadership, feel that. And actually, like one of the areas that we are currently conducting research on is looking at imposterism in women in leadership. So for me, like as a researcher, it's really interesting to hear from someone who started in a role of a CEO as a woman being like, yeah, I definitely felt that. So I mean, I feel very much on the right track with like starting to kind of go down that path with what we're doing. So that's great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the more that I've now come to lean into intuition,
Mhm.
uh, God, I wish I had that when I first started, because I think I wish I had confidence to
Yeah.
trust that, because I look back to when I first started and there were elements of my intuition that led decisions I made when my experience uh, wasn't enough to do that. And I
Yeah.
didn't know that at the time. I didn't know, I would say things like, oh, it's the right thing to do. Or,
Yeah.
I didn't think to myself, oh, that is a skill set you can bring to the table. And of course it's fostered by your experiences and all the rest of it. But I think it's something I'm looking forward to practicing it more, I guess.
Yeah. And with intuition, what would you say for someone who wants to sort of lean into that a little more? What have you done for yourself to lean into that a bit more?
Yeah, I think it's becoming for me apparent in terms of better understanding not just how I navigate the world, but particularly how the people we serve navigate the world, or some of the barriers that might be up against them. And so because my role is to motivate community change and to be a fearless leader, I think I look to having the best possible understanding that I can about the realities of the people that we serve, and that means really honing in on inequities in our systems and institutions. And when I don't have that knowledge, then being confident enough to learn it and be okay with adding to that repertoire, because if I have that solid piece, I always have that to go back to when I have to make a decision or a statement or take a position on something, or develop a new program, or any of those kinds of executive tasks that I find myself into every day, have going back to that place of the end goal and having enough knowledge to inform that, means that that I can rely on myself. I can rely on myself in those kinds of decisions. Mm-hmm.
Great. And so with regards to, your challenges you faced when you began, how do you think those have changed across the years that you've been in the role?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very good question, because I think there is every once in a while something new. There's always something new in my role, and I think that's partly because I force that, because I do think change is inevitable in my leadership. I seek it and I push it, and sometimes a little bit too hard, maybe some of my team might say. So I'm always faced with new things. And there's always a moment when I go back to that imposter syndrome piece. I think now I just know what that looks like, and how to not let myself be there too long. Because I think it's unrealistic to say that, we're building a new building at the YWCA. And so I've been part of conversations where they've said, Melissa, would you like in-floor heating? And you go, well, I don't know, in-floor heating seems nice. I think that's what people say makes you feel comfortable in an indoor space, and then they give you the costs and they tell you the zones, and you kind of go, okay, I need to think about this a little bit more. And you start Googling, mechanical systems for large buildings. And you think to yourself, like, again, who the hell thought this was a good idea to ask me what we should do in this situation? So there's always these moments when you're doing new things and you're pushing to be innovative, where you feel lost, where you haven't experienced something before. And again, I think the difference is I now know that there is no need to do it alone, that I have and have built a community of people around me that have knowledge and expertise, and it's okay to ask them. It's okay to say, I have no idea what you're talking about, and this is not my area, and I'm going to find out more information and get back to you. And having that confidence, I think maybe that's the difference now compared to when I started. I not that I felt a big sense that I had to prove something to anybody except for myself, when I first started. I think now I'm motivated by people who challenge me, but I certainly don't think that I feel like I individually have anything to prove. And so asking for help is something that that I think I lean into huge, and that's a big difference compared to when I started.
Yeah, because I mean, sometimes when you feel like you're in a new role, asking for help might make you feel like you don't know what you're doing, right? I think it's a pretty common
Yeah.
way to react, now that you're more experienced, you realize the benefit in doing so, right? Compared to before. So that's really great. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great.
Yeah. But I do have to say, I'm not sure that I feel any different about my capacity or skill level than I did when I first started. It's
Yeah.
funny that we think, oh, we'll gain more experience and we'll have these moments and that'll give us this confidence and we'll be like, no, I know this. I did this before. That's never happened.
Oh yeah, no, that's the thing
Yeah.
about like it's not that you actually have less imposterism, probably it's like you're better at managing it or something.
Yes.
You know what I mean? You're
Yes.
still like, I don't know what I'm doing, but oh
Yeah.
well. More comfortable maybe with the unknown is probably what it might
Yes.
come down
Yeah.
to. Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of
That's right.
knowing, believing in yourself that you can overcome the unknown, versus when you don't feel like that. But yeah, that's so funny because it's so true. It never goes away. That's
No,
the secret. It never goes
it
away.
doesn't go away. No, it really doesn't. Yeah,
Oh, that's a
exactly.
great answer. And lastly, we'll kind of end off on in this area of questioning is what message would you like to send to young women and allies who are watching today's like what advice would you give women specifically who are struggling to kind of find their place within an organization?
Yeah. I think I think that it's so important to know that you belong and to find the fit where you also feel that where there is you have a sense of belonging there and purpose. And I think it's funny when I think about like uh what would I say to my younger self as I was in university or
Yeah.
those types of things. And just yesterday I had lunch with two young folks that are finishing up their university, and like I have to tell you, I've every opportunity I can to spend an ounce, a moment with somebody who's at that place in their life where they're experiencing university and they're young. I take it as if I can, because the amount of energy that you get from being with somebody or understanding a place where possibilities are endless, but also to spend time with a generation who I think leads with values first, lives their life with a sense of values first, to me is so inspirational. And so I think it took me a while to get there as a young person, to know that I could make decisions about my career, about what kind of role I wanted to have in my community that matched and fit my values. It took me a while. I think the new generation is going to demand that. And I feel that as an employer, that it is so important that our staff, our new staff, feel a connection to the values and the work that we're doing. And so I think that's an awesome place to start. And then there's opportunity to find where that belongs. I think for people who aren't necessarily finding that sense of belonging or understanding, I would say maybe my advice would be to those who are recruiting and want those young voices and women at the table and marginalized folks at the table, is to really look at how their systems and institutions are set up and what barriers they're setting that is leading to that inequity, because it's there. And I think that is single-handedly sometimes one of the greatest barriers to particularly women, but Indigenous women and Black women and the women we so desperately need at our table, is that there is a missing piece to the capacity for somebody to sit at that table, that there is an equity that exists there that is not the individual's work to have to flow through. It's up to the organization who's doing the recruiting to change and create that space.
Yeah, that is honestly wonderful advice. I think from my perspective as someone who researches this, a lot of times, a lot of advice is, well, you just need to, like, I hate to say like lean in because like it's a very
Yeah.
and I get so frustrated with that because, there are systemic problems that are causing women and other visible minorities to not be able to access certain things, and to tell people, well, if you just do a little more, you'll be able to do that, is, I just don't think, good advice. So the way you just said it is just wonderful. And I hope like everyone listening really appreciates, like, that was wonderful advice, honestly. So yeah, great.
Yeah, thanks. I'm tired of this thing about the glass ceiling. You know, I'm like, that should never even be a thing. And quite frankly, it is there. It's still there. And it's not up to the individual to break through it. It's up to the organizations and institutions to get rid of it. And that is a responsibility that I think is really important.
Yeah, for sure. And like, we, even within research, like to think of it more as like a labyrinth, because it's not like women go along their careers and everything's fine the whole way, and then all of a sudden, oops, glass ceiling. It really is complexity from the minute women are in careers that they're dealing with. So yeah,
absolutely.
So yeah, they're cutting us off, I see it. Okay.
Oh goodness.
So yeah, I mean, I'm gonna pop to questions if anyone has any questions. So firstly, thank you so much, Melissa. That was wonderful. I really had a great conversation with you. So I'm gonna take a quick peek at the chat and see if we have any questions. And if not, if someone has a question right now, if they want to pop in, that would be fine. Okay, so first question. What inspired you to start working with the YWCA, and what is the significance of the organization to the development of women?
Well, that's a good question. I had worked in other community organizations. I spent a significant amount of time at the YMCA, interestingly, speaking of gender, and then I left and bought a gymnastics gym. Amazing adventure. I decided I was going to become an entrepreneur and I was going to make money in the world. I was no longer going to work in nonprofit. And I spent about a year running this business, and I loved it. I was good at it and I loved it. And it reminded me so much about how nonprofit sector needs to see itself as businesses, as entrepreneurs, and all these pieces, and as much as that sector needs to have social good. And it taught me lots of things. I was not looking to go anywhere else, and recruiting firm called me, and slowly, as I was having these conversations with the recruiting firm about the YWCA, I realized how much I was missing being back in the community. And so for me, I had to have some convincing at that point, but I just knew that kind of work in the community and being part of something bigger than myself, beyond gymnastics and cheerleading and all those wonderful things I got to learn about, was just such an important piece of it. And the YWCA, was that as a community organization, but also advocates. And so it fed back to that social justice piece that I was so drawn to in university, that I could both do good community work, but also advocate. And so I think the YW for women in our community, we've been in this community for over 100 years and have advocated, sometimes silently, sometimes not so silently, but certainly I recognize when I came here how much authentic work was being done that nobody really knew about. And the YWCAs were the organizations that started the United Way movement. They started the Women's Foundation nationally. Like, there's so many things that this organization has done and continues to do that is just working on equity, but also I think being a voice for women in our community always. So.
Great, thank you. That was wonderful. Do you have any recommendations for any professional groups that you are a part of, or conferences that are great for women in leadership that you attend, or anything like that you could recommend for young women?
Well, that's a good question. I'm so bad at these things, but I will say I'm very bad at these things, and giving myself time to learn things is something I'm just starting to do. And so I love stories. I learn through stories. And so particularly in the winter months, that's when storytelling opportunities come out. And so anytime I have the ability to read somebody else's story, participate in storytelling workshops. That is where I learn the most, is through other people's stories. So I recommend, if you're a person like me, to do that. An organization or something that I am a huge fan of is called Informed Opinions.
I'm on that as well. Yeah.
You're on this. Okay,
Yeah.
brilliant. I just think everybody should.
Yeah.
And
That's
also,
great.
if you ever have an opportunity to do any of their training, I think it's fantastic, because I think one of the things that we lack as women is maybe the confidence or the place. I'm going to say not the confidence. I'm going to say the place to say what our opinion. And the thing that Informed Opinion pushes towards is, you know what to say it, and really creating the space in the news world, but also all sorts of platforms to be able to highlight women. And so I think check out Informed Opinion's website, sign up because you're an expert at something, and sign up to be part of their database, but also follow them. I think that's a great
they do a great job of, like, if you do have something in the news or whatever, they will retweet it if you're a part of it. Like, they do a great job of trying to push women's voices in the media and social media and stuff. Yeah, it's a really great organization. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Is there any other questions that anyone has before we work to wrap up here? We got it for a few more minutes if you have a question.
Well, maybe I'd also say Raise Her locally. Raise Her organization has so many. I've participated as a mentor, and then I've had the opportunity. This is how I tap into the energy and spirit of young people, is through Raise Her. And so as soon as I get a name or something, I email these young women and young people all the time. Would you please go for lunch with me? Like, this kind of thing. But Raise Her is a great organization, both for formal and informal mentorship and opportunities to engage with people in all sorts of professions. So I highly recommend that as well.
Great. Yeah, great. A more local one too. That's wonderful. So if there is no further questions, we just really want to thank you for coming and talking to us for this Alumni Effect series. And yeah, our next one will be on April 18th, 2023. And so just pay attention to the social media and website for any updates on any other things happening. And thank you again so much, Melissa. It was really wonderful speaking with you today. I had a wonderful time.
Yeah, thank you very much, Erica. I really appreciate it.
Do you want to answer one quick last question?
Sure.
How do you balance the many different facets of the CEO role in a nonprofit? Because yeah, you sound busy. That's a great question.
Yes, this is a very good question. I have no hobbies. No, that's not the answer.
Deer watching.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Except for deer watching, that's my hobby. So if that tells you how balanced I am, there you go. No, you know what? I think that it's about having the right team around, and I know that sounds like a bit of a cop out and a bit corny, but it's very true. With when I work really hard at supporting and making sure I have the right people doing the right things, because I know at the end of the day that is where the success will come from. And allows me to prioritize and continue to move forward. I think that isn't necessarily the case if you're not changing or moving forward or have big projects on the go, but certainly focusing on making sure I have the right people doing the right things is a huge balance, or a huge thing that helps me balance the different facets of being the CEO.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah.
And watching.
Yeah, good team. Okay, well, thank you so much. I think that's everything for questions. So thanks again. And yeah, look forward to the next alumni series, everyone. Thank you, everyone who came out to listen to Melissa talk.
Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Dr. Carlton. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care, you guys. Bye now.